Hello, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 134, How to Be a More Expressive Flutist with Marina Piccinini. Do you find yourself wanting a space for your unique voice, ideas, and offerings to be heard? Unfortunately, in our current times, a lot of in-person opportunities have been lost. Because of this, I am encouraging you to consider digital opportunities for yourself and your business. I am offering the Podcasting Musician. Create your music podcast on a low budget to amplify your voice and offerings. In these classes, we will build your podcast from the ground up. Podcasting has been growing steadily for the last 15 years, and it continues to soar even during a pandemic. Remote classes begin on December 15th, 2020. Register today at heidikbegay.com/thepodcastingmusician. See you soon. Hi, Marina.
Hi. Hello, Heidi. It works.
Yes, it does. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. I'm fine. We have a really beautiful, unexpectedly beautiful day on the last day of October. I'm in the Swiss Alps right now. So, we had snow and I can see the snow on the mountains everywhere. But today it's really warm and it's just gorgeous.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Yeah. Well, it's the situation in the world is just not fantastic. And Europe is pretty bad and Switzerland's pretty badly hit with the second wave already. So feel also very fortunate to be in the Alps where we have like a natural social distancing.
Sure.
That's very fortunate.
Yeah. I have been Facebook stalking you a little bit, and I saw that you were in the Swiss Alps, and not that, this pandemic is fortunate for anyone, but the Swiss Alps is not a bad place to do quarantine.
No, and it's not the first time. I mean, in March, I had 3 days. I was in Paris and I was flying to New York. And we have this little place here in the Alps. And so I came here supposedly for 3 days to see my husband because he was going on tour. I was going on tour. And we ended up staying in absolute lockdown for over 3 months until the 15th of June. So, so I feel like I've really gotten to know this mountainous area very well. But it's true that it's just, you can go outside and you don't have to worry about meeting people or, so and it's very healthy. The air is so great for flute playing. Oh, my lungs have expanded.
Yeah, plus the altitude.
It's amazing. And I have been able to travel in Europe, in the last months. I was back in Paris, I was in Vienna, and different places in Germany. But now it's, everything is shutting down again. The great thing is that we have the internet and we can still connect, right?
Yeah, here we are doing a flute podcast together on opposite sides of the world. Yeah, it's amazing. Oh, man. I visited the Swiss Alps once when I was 15, 16 on an orchestra tour, actually. And we were there for 2 weeks, and I absolutely loved it and fell in love with the area and the people. I cried when they said we had to get back on the plane because the air is so fresh. And you mentioned that, and it really is. Like, I just remember breathing in this clean air and just thinking, oh, this is heaven.
Yeah, if you're not going to be in a city, of course, it always changes, but it's so high. We're quite high up. Already we're above the fog line. So we also get a lot of beautiful days. And everything is great. I feel like the quality of life, even though it's very modest, we don't have distractions here of concert halls or cinemas. We have a lot of cows. Yeah. But the quality of life, the food, the lifestyle, it's very healthy. And, it comes at a time when, as I say, I feel very, very fortunate that we can escape up here. But of course, I'm itching to travel.
Yeah. Yes,
Oh.
yes. So with you being in Europe right now, how is teaching remotely with your students at Peabody?
Oh, well, that's like second nature at this point because in March, when the lockdown came, I had to kind of scramble and start doing that. And we thought it was very temporary. But it's turned out to be also, I mean, Peabody is connected to Johns Hopkins, which is one of the major medical centers and very much at the core of the whole research and information about COVID. So they're very strict and the whole school is on remote. So since then, I started teaching my students. I do a lot of master classes for my own students. I set up so many things in March, April, May. We did a virtual collaboration with over 70 of my students, former students and current. And we had WhatsApp challenge groups and all this teaching on Zoom. And then my master classes that I do in the summer, the MPIMC, which I usually do at the New World Center, we decided to move that online. And I think because we were at the end of May, we were probably one of the first flute classes. Then everybody did it as well, of course. But we felt like we were trailblazers and learned a lot about how to work with the Zoom. And I think things are also changing. I just discovered this other platform that works with Zoom. So now my students can actually play in real time, whereas before it was very difficult. It would freeze and things like that. So now I think things are getting better. And some aspects are really great about it, actually. It's the fact they have to always make videos and upload them, listen to themselves in a more distanced way because we listen to the recordings together. I share the screen and we do that. So, and there are aspects that they can be less emotional and a little bit more able to make, unbiased judgment and not think, oh, I feel this way. So that there are, and I'm only mentioning the good things because everybody knows what the bad things are.
Yeah.
We might as well not even talk about them.
Yeah, that's a whole different list.
Yeah. But, what I notice more than anything is really it's the presence of the personality, which I think almost for you and I doing this podcast, I feel that we can be even a little bit more present with each other because one of your senses is gone and we focus on the conversation between us. When you're on video, I think there's a kind of a spreading out of the attention with the visual as much as the audio. And when you're in person, the whole presence of the person is felt in a very different way.
Very true.
And so that's what bothers me the most, that I can't somehow make them feel me in the way that I know helps teaching so much. It's the same with collaborations, all these virtual collaborations. And I actually had to do a piece, a world premiere. Aaron J. Kernis wrote was going to be a solo flute piece for me for the Seattle Chamber Music Festival. And it turned out that he thought, well, no, we can't do it live anyway. So let me write it for 8 flutes and piccolo, and you do all the parts. So I had to play all 9 parts myself and put it together. And even me coordinating with myself was very difficult because the communication is so nonverbal. It's just not even visual; it's feeling. So there was a lot, a lot of things that one learns.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, because I know that the topic you wanted to speak to me about was about, expression in music and that, and I realized that expression is nonverbal, it's non-visual, it's something else as well that you can't even put your finger on it. That is expression too. And we count on it so much, and I didn't even realize it until we got distanced from each other.
Oh, for sure. Yes. I'm finding that with some of my students, and I'm bringing this up now because you're talking about expression and, that this quality that you just can't see, it's this magic that because of COVID and playing through Zoom and Skype and things like that, a lot of times my students will kind of almost shut down now because they're playing through electronics and not in person, Are you finding that, or not the case at Peabody? I mean, your students are at such a high level.
Well, I have only 2 new students this year. So the rest of the class is not new to me, and I'm not new to them. And I have also felt that has helped a lot. I think it's a little more challenging for the students who didn't work with me before. because also you can read the signs a little bit better. And I think that there are some of them, they take curves, because we have been doing this since March. And although there was a summer break, I still stayed connected with a majority of my students in various ways. One thing that was very different from my students is that because I travel so much, performing, and I don't even live in the States anymore, I didn't see them every week as people usually do. I've never done that. I always teach every few weeks and very intensely then when I'm there. So my students are used to being on their own for a long time, preparing a great deal of things, and then kind of putting everything aside and having this monster week with me. Yeah. And I laugh because the whole school knows when I'm coming into town. It's really cute. But also that has, I think, helped them, be able to deal with, they're very independent. And kind of what I hear you talking about, what I believe you're speaking about too, is that these kids are not, they're used to being, seeing you every week, and now they have to do it in a different manner, and they're not used to it, and that's hard. And so I think with my students, that's less of an issue. But I have to say that, some of them, after a while, I can see there was a point with some of them that I could see it got to them. This is everything, because it's not just the lessons with me. It's, they have to do their chamber music or all their academic courses, their ensemble things. They have to make videos. They have to go on platforms that are all electronic. I mean, everything's online, and they get tired of it. And some of them felt the isolation. And so I do other things. Sometimes I make these challenge groups to buoy them up a little bit. And it's hard. I do a lot of master classes with my students. So we're all of us together on the Zoom, so they can also see each other and talk to each other. And they're very close to each other. They have their own group chats and things like that. So I think all these things help a little bit pick each other up, because somebody's always going to fall down, right? And it's good to have the support system, even if it's remote.
Yeah. It sounds like a great community that you have with them.
Oh, it is. I love it. It's been a while, and it took a long time to create it. And I've learned a lot, of course, about how to do it. And I hope I'm always learning new things, new ways of changing. And Zoom certainly has been one of them. Yeah. But some of it was born out of the necessity, because of I wasn't going to be living in Baltimore, and I do travel and play so much, and I invite them to be part of my life in that way. And I also have both an American and a European upbringing, and so the European system is very much about masterclass. So I do a lot of that in person as well. And the idea is to create a studio environment where they are very supportive and friendly with each other, but still competitive. And that's a very fine balance to find, exactly where they stimulate each other and push each other and compete, but not in a difficult way. When I was at Juilliard, it was very competitive and not in the absolute nicest way. So I felt that that's something was important to me to avoid, because it doesn't help anybody, And
True.
Also, I think the students, the people, this for yourself, I'm sure, the people you went to school with, you went through so much together. They become a life source for you. I'm sure you help each other out, as you grow older all the time. And some of my friends, we do that. I can't do this. Can you do it? Or this or that. It's important to know that is your community.
Yes. Yes, I totally agree. At the Peabody Conservatory of the Johns Hopkins University, you will receive the artistic training and career preparation needed to become a 21st century artist, an education that will show you how to not only find opportunities, but to create them and make them your own. For 160 years, Peabody has been focused on excellence and innovation in the performing arts and leading the way in developing artists for a changing world. Peabody is a community that builds on time-tested traditions while pushing the boundaries and creating new standards in music and dance programs. Peabody offers degrees in flute performance at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels, as well as a performer's certificate, Artist Diploma, and Graduate Performance Diploma. Their world-renowned flute faculty includes Marina Piccinini, Erica Peel, and Aaron Goldman. Learn more at peabody.jhu.edu. Amazing. So you brushed up on this a little bit in our conversation earlier on, but would you like to elaborate more on this idea of what does playing expressively mean to you?
Yeah, it's a pretty loaded topic.
Yeah.
But it's something that is, I think, for me, very, very important. You know, the master classes I give through my MPIMC, in fact, although the classes themselves, you know, it falls under this umbrella and we have different things going on. My own classes, I call them Beyond the Score, Expression Through Interpretation. So that's a title that kind of came to me at one point, the fact that you are expressive through your interpretation. And if you can learn to read the signs and understand how to interpret the black and white squiggles that are in front of you, you know, transform them from squiggles into something that's really tangible and communicative, then you become expressive. I think people often think that expression, you know, you are expressive, that means you have a lot of feeling. But I disagree with that. I mean, I think it's not the feeling, it's not enough. You have to have the tools to make the feelings come to life. And there's so many different things that are a part of that, I think. So we can talk a little bit about the different aspects, if that's a good way to proceed. I, as you've probably noticed, talk a lot.
Oh,
so
the floor is yours, Marina. You can talk as much as you want.
And what's really great is that we are on a podcast because I am half Italian and half Brazilian. So I speak with my hands as well. So I'm gesturing like crazy, and I'm just glad you can't see it.
Oh, no, I would love to see it. I actually talk with my hands, too. And it actually kind of annoys my family because I'm very expressive with my hands.
And see, there you go. You use that word.
Yes.
So it is the idea of expression is so large. I mean, express means to pour out, right? And then you think about things like expressionism in art, and then that's a completely different route. I mean, that signifies, you know, letting everything you have on the inside out, no matter how grotesque it comes out on the canvas. So I think, I mean, one thing that to me is very important, and I really speak to my students on various different levels. One is just a purely technical level. I think to be able to express, which means to communicate, you know, to tell people something, you have to have the tools or the technique in which to do that. And that covers the ground of playing your instrument really well. So you have to be able to be impeccable in your in the precision of your finger technique, in the speed and the coordination, in the precision of the tonguing, which then turns into articulation, the breath control, the ability to play dynamics, the ability to do a diminuendo forever, to play very soft in the high register, very loud in the bottom register, to choose the vibrato you want to choose, which helps further your cause. What am I missing? I mean, play perfectly in tune. And with musical intonation, I don't mean with a machine. I really mean understanding where you are in the key and leading tones and tones that fall down. You know, all these things. So you can call upon, it to me, it's like being a painter and you have this palette, you know, with all the different colors. And it's not just that you can pick on any one color from the palette. You can mix them together as well. So you have all these different aspects that make up really impeccable and tasteful, really good instrumental playing. And without these tools, it's like grammar. You know, if you speak badly and your grammar is not correct, people stop wanting to take you seriously.
True.
Because they think you're uneducated or you're childish or you're confusing, you know, all these things. So it is really that to me is what the basis of playing really demonstrates. And I really insist on my students being able to master these things, I put a lot of emphasis on these different aspects of technique. I have a class that's called Triple T. It's tone, technique, and tonguing. And, I isolate them all. And I believe in exercises. I believe really in mastering. And because you don't know what you're going to be called upon to do at any given moment. And your playing should not, your technique or lack of technique should not be the thing that keeps you from being able to say what you want to say. So that to me is a really huge first step. But the second step is actually, you can have all the technique you want, all the grammar you want, but you have to have something to say.
Yeah.
Which is, sounds very simple and we giggle at it, but it's amazing to me how people don't know what to say. Often they just want to follow the indications that are in the score. And that's like an empty shell, just playing what's on the score. Well, I do a crescendo because it says, or I do diminuendo, or I play this note because it says, but I'm putting it together. And that's where it goes sort of beyond the score. You have to read between the lines. You have to have a sense of, a conceptual sense. But I think even in that element, there are so many things that we can address that help us know what to say. I mean, knowing about style, understanding the differences in stylistic and nationalistic concepts. So if you play Bach, it's actually not like playing Vivaldi, even though they lived close to the same time and not that far from each other, but the temperament and the tradition that they came from is so different. So understanding, also Mozart, the classical style, the romantic style. And if you understand the style, that actually means you have to understand the time, what was going on historically, the norms, the social norms, and what wars people were with. So there's a tremendous amount of study that is way beyond the flute, way beyond music that we can immerse ourselves in, that informs understanding the temperament of what we're doing, which is basically what style is. A funny thing, like as an example, I sometimes, my students will play, let's say they're playing Bach, and they're playing the partito or something with a dance movement. And we talk, do you know what this dance form is? And then I asked them just to, do you know what these people were wearing?
Yeah.
And, and if we think about the constricting bodices that men and women had to wear, and the shoes, the way the shoes were, and the kinds of floors that they had to dance on, and, headgear, the wigs, all these things, let alone the fact that, maybe a man and a woman couldn't be alone, couldn't speak, or people couldn't speak directly to each other in the same way, nor could the classes mix, and so all these constraints are very evident in the formality of the music as well. So I find these to be really a very interesting and illuminating way of thinking. I do this a lot. When I'm playing French pieces, I also understand the language, and I think the language informs the style of the music. French is a language with a lot of liaison. So it is very things flow very easily, and I play Paganini. It's Italian, and it's much more syllabic and vivacious and kind of it's determined in a way. So it's a very different kind of more up and down rather than the smooth French, and that changes the piece. And understanding that, or let's say recognizing it, helps as well. Gives you an inspiration and at least a key to which direction you have to go.
Yes.
So that's one very easy way of beyond the score. I think. Let me see what else so much I can say. It's really an endless topic. Please interrupt me anytime.
Oh, no. I am sitting back and enjoying learning from you and just hearing all of your beautiful examples. I love the gold nuggets that I'm pulling out is, just your example about grammar. If you can't speak well, then how are you going to be able to express yourself if the grammar's not
Absolutely,
there?
yeah.
And then the art and the dancing and the, quote unquote, costumes of the day. Such great nuggets. It's amazing, Marina.
Well, all of our lives are intertwined forever, from the past, the present, and the future. And you cannot remove one thing and displace it. And, even the way we perform today is again informed by all that we have been through. After these, when you sit down and you play Varese density 21.5 and you think, well, this piece was written at that time, and there had been this one world war and all these industrial developments and all these things. Of course, somebody before World War I couldn't have played this piece in the same way. They just were, not that the world wasn't brutal, but it wasn't that kind of loud noise that we started getting used to. And nowadays, we have so many different things and we hear. So I sometimes think, people often say that we play, for instance, the music of Schubert. The tendency is to be much more aggressive nowadays than it would have been, because life was slower. Pianos were, he's still, Schubert in his death house, which is really close to where I live in Vienna. He has a little spinet there, a little tiny piano, which is not even a full piano. That's what he was playing on. So we hear things differently and we react to things differently too.
That's all amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, actually, I think, because it's endlessly interesting and curious for me. I find it. So I think being bored is something that is impossible, in music. You just can't. There's always so much. I think other aspects, that people need to address is sometimes something I find in students that's often lacking is, first of all, there's also an idea of understanding structure. And, we have these classes in school, but nobody takes them seriously in school. Nobody takes theory seriously. Nobody takes music history seriously. Yeah. And yet, the reason we have them is because they help us with the tools that we have. So if you know the structure of a piece, you have much more an understanding of how to build it up and retain the tension. Both in a phrase and in the whole movement or in a whole piece. And that's also what, brings the audience into you, is that you can spellbind them, so to speak. And that's being able to capture the attention of people and never let it go, especially not in the silence.
Yes.
The silences are the most poignant places of extreme communication in a way. So I think understanding the form is very helpful. It's also very helpful for memorizing. It's understanding the harmonic structure of what you're playing. I bet this happens to you too. You suddenly ask a student what key they're in, they actually look at the score for a while. and just that silence, that one moment, you already know what the answer is. Yeah. I'm trying to figure it out on the spot. And then sometimes you'll be amazed at the crazy responses you get.
Yeah.
It's like, what? On what planet is this in this key? Right? They don't even know if it's minor or major sometimes, right? Which of course they do because they feel it, but they need to understand it a little bit more obviously. Not just this or that. So, and then one of my favorite questions when somebody's playing is why are you playing it this way? And if the response is, God forbid, because I feel like that's nice, or, I feel it this way, that's just the absolute wrong response, because you have to be able to back up every single thing you say with a legitimate, intelligent musical response first. And then you can also, of course, add your preference, and you can feel something or be struck by something, but you have to be able to reason it, and argue it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it when I have a difference of opinion with a student and they can convince me of the viability of their opinion. Yes. That thrills me. Just you too, I'm sure. It's great. That means they're thinking, they're following through, they're being artistic. And we all should be different, of course. We don't want copycats or cookie cutters, right?
Yeah.
But so what it is about thinking for oneself, being independent again. But you have to, you can't just go blindly. You have to know how to think and what to think and what works. So if you're in minor, obviously you have a different kind of, naturally a different feeling comes in, and than if you're in major. What's beautiful too is something that I do with my studio every year, because this is something I do myself, is play all the Bach sonatas. I often perform them all in one evening. And we do it with a studio where everybody has to play one of the Bach sonatas once a year. It's called our Bach Marathon Concert. And I give them the added privilege of having to perform it from memory.
Nice.
Well, yeah. And they hate me just before, but when it's over, they love it. And it's the thing they remember. And if you memorize something, you learn it in a very different way. And one of the things that always strikes me is how these 7 sonatas, and we do all 7, authentic or not, who cares? Yeah. And the partita. So these 8 pieces, how amazingly distinctive they are from each other. And because of the key, it's actually the key that they're in often dictates to Bach, I think, already what the mood is going to be, what the attitude is going to be. The B minor has to be in this mood because it's so intense and so dark and serious and elegant at the same time. But A major is bright and sunny, and so it's got that openness and that almost childlike fun in it. And then G minor, E flat, E minor, E major, all these things, C major, they're also different, and it's because of the key. So understanding keys is more than just, being a little theory nerd. It's really about, I think, transcending that and understanding the mood that you have to also convey. So that's another hugely important element of knowledge and understanding.
Yes. And speaking of form, I think it was Stravinsky who said that there's a lot of freedom in form. And so that's what comes to my mind when you're talking about, knowing the theory, the form, etc.
Well, it's a great thing to say. I think the Spaniards have a funny phrase they use, which translated means the exception confirms the rule. And so it's really, the fact is we have all these forms, and breaking the forms is part of the mold. I mean, again, going back to Bach, there's nobody who breaks more rules than Bach. Yeah. And yet it's amazing. And I think Stravinsky was somebody who was very connected to structure and form. I mean, as in his neoclassic days, but he changed them too. I mean, it's not, again, it's not a cookie cutter. Even Mozart, who is maybe the most cookie cutter of all people when it comes to form, it's absolute classic sonata form, still manages to break it somehow. I think that's also a mark of these geniuses, that their individualism was so strong and they weren't having to adhere to anything. It's just the minor composers that, end up following the rules and churning out pieces. And we are so, in this respect, I think, not fortunate on one hand, because the flute repertoire is so often represented by minor composers. The great composers, they're writing for all the other instruments except ours, and partly because of the development of the instrument and things like that. But which is why I think it's great to transcribe, and why we're in such a privileged situation now in the 20th century, where people really, really are writing for the flute, great composers. And Baroque also, we had a great deal. That was our golden age. But that beautiful Romantic period, unfortunately, we have very little. But the good thing about it is that because the music is so often second rate, it requires the performer to be that much more dedicated to bringing it to life and to making it a great performance. So, we can perform really well and communicate and captivate our audience with pieces that are not as good. And sometimes, a pianist will play, let's say, I don't know, a Brahms sonata, and they'll play it really not that well, but the piece is so good that, it still goes over. But if we did that, we wouldn't be able to. So we should be playing their repertoire, because we're so trained in bringing things to life.
Nice.
I'm just complimenting flute players. What can I say?
We are the best.
Absolutely. But then if you keep moving in this idea of reading the score, I think, these are bigger things that I'm talking about that allow us to start knowing what to say, having something to say. But there are other elements, just purely reading the score. Actually, when I was about 20, I started going to the Marlborough Festival in Vermont. That was started by Rudolf Serkin. And it was really, Moise had been the flutist there. So it's a very piano and string heavy kind of festival, and was originally. And the repertoire is, very much the Central European repertoire of Mozart and Dvorak and Brahms and Schubert and Schumann. And the great insistence on that in that festival is really to be absolutely true to the score. So they never allowed us to do any transcriptions. They you had to take every repeat of everything. And it was quite a challenge in a way when I was younger, and I became kind of indoctrinated with this need and necessity to read the score perfectly. And so, all the scores I get, any Baroque or classical or romantic, I get the urtext so that I really can look at what the composer said and not be swayed by what an editor suggests I should do, or wrong articulations or things. I want to be able to make up my mind, and I want to be able to read the score as precisely as I can. And I'm constantly amazed at how precise composers can be. They're not always, but some of them, for instance, somebody like Hindemith, every dot means something. If he has a slur with the dot, it's totally different than if there were no dot under that slur. It's not a little, it's totally different. The length of the crescendo diminuendo, the choice of a sforzando or a fortepiano or just an accent. I mean, all these things, there's such a wealth of information that composers often, I think, very painstakingly put onto their score. And then, we go and we kind of ignore them. Yeah. So often we just kind of look at it and take it as a, general idea. So that's a kind of a ballpark thing. And I think that's so unfair to the composers. They work very hard. It's not easy to translate something that you hear in the universe, a sound that you hear in the universe, which is basically what music is, and bring it down to the level of notation in black and white. It must be so hard to do that. And then to have the people ignore it is really, I think, terrible. But I don't mean that we have to be enslaved by it. We have to just understand what the composer means, why he wrote this, or he or she, why they wrote this. And then we have to be able to translate. I'm all about language. But it is really understanding the why that this is notated. And such a great question that I ask of myself, and I suggest that my students do it too, is to always to ask the question, why is this here? Or what if this wasn't here? Sometimes that's just as good, to take something away and say, well, what if there were no crescendo here? How would that change the feeling? How would that change the phrasing? How would that change the momentum? Or why is this accent here? It's not just there for no reason.
Right.
What does it do? Is it a high point in the phrase? Is it is it a dance and he's trying to accentuate a different beat? Is it a hemiola? Is it jazzy? I mean, there's so many things that can be the answers, but
yeah.
And then again, also knowing the composer, more about the composer is helpful. If you're playing Poulenc, you should, listen to other pieces, the sextet and the oboe sonata, the clarinet sonata, and the dialogue of the Carmelites. And then you realize that Poulenc is a composer that writes dynamics for the flute because he thinks the flute has these limitations. So he often writes forte in the bottom register. And it's not necessarily that he wants to write forte, but if he doesn't write forte, he thinks that the rest of the winds and sextet are going to play louder than so he wants to balance it out. And you kind of have to educate yourself about that. And that comes through looking.
Yeah.
And not being tied just to the one piece you're playing.
Yes.
And if you do Mozart, if you don't listen to the operas, you're sunk.
Right. Yep, exactly.
You know that. Yeah. So and then you realize, okay, every piece of Mozart is an opera, and what happens in opera? There's interaction, there's fighting, there's jealousy, there's flirting, there's heartache, and all of that is in his music all the time. And you have to go searching for it in the bass line or wherever.
Yeah.
So I think also being able to be true to the score and asking the question, why is this here? Why isn't this here? How would it be if it were a different note, or if it were a different dynamic, or if it were a different key? And sometimes moving away from what is there to what isn't there can kind of open your imagination.
I love it. Such great information. So
lifelong of learning.
Yes.
It never stops.
Yes, that curiosity and always seeking. I love it. So you are such a world traveler, an international icon. I'm sure you have come across, countless of different artists, whether, a musician or an author, a sculptor, a painter. Who are the musicians, artists, authors, sculptors who you admire in this area of being truly expressive through their pieces?
Oh, well, there are so many. I mean, there really are so many. And I think that's one of the incredibly humbling and at the same time exciting aspects of being alive, is that the sheer talent that is in the world and the capacity that human beings have. And they say we only use 20% of our brain. I mean, it's kind of it's always evolving. I mean, I have, of course, my musical icons that really touch me, even, growing up, and they're like family because you live with them all your life. And you can't help it. I mean, for me, Mozart is the reason I play the flute. So, there's to me almost nothing. I mean, I say that nothing better than Mozart, except Bach, and I could go on and on. But he's such the music of this person is so endlessly fascinating and touched me so much that I was drawn to become a musician because of it, and I was quite young. And at the same time that happened, it was because I went to see the Magic Flute. And that was my first, live experience with music. And I came out of there saying, I need to play the flute. Although what really touched me was the singing. And the sense of the combination of drama and music together, and the voice, just the quality of the voice. I wanted to be a singer. I don't know. And so singers have also been a huge influence in my life. One of my favorite singers, who I never met, but my father did, was Maria Callas. And she's, I think, a wonderful example because she was so consummately expressive, and she placed the energy and she followed what she wanted to say so much that even at times she was kind of out of tune, and people often criticize her for, kind of losing control that way. But it just doesn't bother me because the expression and the communication is so strong that I am swept away in it. And I find that to be the most important thing, is the communication of, and so she's a really great icon for me. And, another singer icon is actually somebody I knew very well, and that's my father-in-law, Ernst Hefliger. I started dating Andreas when I was 18, and we're still married. And I met his father, about a year after, very shortly, because I came to Switzerland to spend the summer with him. I ditched Tanglewood, which nobody could believe I would do, and came to study with Nicole, who I was also one of the people I had always admired. And then I met his father, and his father used to give master classes, and I was preparing for my lessons for Nicole, and Andreas would accompany the master classes to make money. We were kids, and his father then started calling me in to the master class every once in a while to come and play the flute parts of the, cantatas and different all the Bachs. So Ausliebe, I mean, I played 100 times. And I started working with him as well. And he taught me a lot about playing Bach, about playing in the classical style, about singing, about using the flute as a voice. He was one of my great mentors who was not a flute player, and also just the most amazing man. And I was so privileged to have known him. He passed away some years ago, more than 10 years ago now. But it was just, he had worked with Karajan and Furtwängler. I mean, it's just it was just so wonderful to have the privilege to play with him and for him, and to hear him and to learn from him. So those two great singers in my life, I think. Just can go on and on. I mean, my violin, my other incredible idol always has been Heifetz. And that to me is, just how I want to play the instrument, where again, you supersede any technical limitations. And I think, I don't know if it was him or Horowitz, who somebody was trying to criticize them and said, "Oh, you're just nothing more than a virtuoso," trying to imply that you have to, you're empty, you're all technique. And then the response was that you have to be more than a virtuoso. You actually have to first be a virtuoso, which is in line with what I'm saying a little bit as well. You have to, you can't deny the craft of really being able to go make the instrument truly what it is. It is an instrument. I mean, it's a means to an end. It doesn't matter what you play. And it's not what you play that matters, is what you say. Yeah. It's so these are such heroes, because they really could do these things. And I mean, I'm a huge visual arts fan. Love sculpture. I love painting. My daughter's actually she studied philosophy, and now she's doing a year in London in arts. And I'm so thrilled, that she's so good. She's such a good artist, but I'm so thrilled that somebody is doing this art, which I would have loved to be an artist. But I mean, and there's so many, artists alive and dead. I mean, there's such a variety of art. I mean, from the past, I love things like the Expressionists, and I love people like Van Gogh, and I love modern art and try to collect it. But it's really hard to do, because you have to, find people when they're not known so you can afford them. So, and I love to read. I've read a lot of Russian novels. I'm just reading one that I never have. So,
what are you reading now?
I'm reading a Bulgakov, The Master and Margarita. It's the one I've never read it, and it's very good. It's very nice to read. I read a lot of, mostly, I have to say, I read mostly fiction. I'm not a huge nonfiction fan. I don't like to get my information that way. I prefer if somebody just tells me, or listen to a podcast like yours.
There you go.
If somebody tells me. I don't like to I don't like following recipes. I don't, I'm not that kind of person. Okay. So, but I love eating. I think that's a great part of being a great musician also. It really helps. I mean, it's a sense, one of your senses, and appreciating food and how it's put together and what it means in culture, and the fact that you share with people. That's such a great part of life. I mean, we're going to need 1,000 podcasts, to get through, and the people I admire.
Marina will be all of November.
Yeah, that's right. Non-stop talker.
The episode 2 will be just on cuisine, and
oh, that would be so great. I think people would love that. Yeah, we should all eat good food, and we will be so happy. But you know that you get so happy when you eat good food, and then you're generous, and you're stimulated, and you're imaginative, and There's one thing I do want to say about being expressive that I haven't, if you don't mind, if you indulge me.
Oh, yes.
I think it's something that also fascinates me a little bit about being a performer is this incredible duality we have, because to be able to be expressive, you have to, of course, have emotions, and feel them and open yourself up to them. You don't necessarily have to have experienced something, but, emotions can be watered down or narrowed down, or not watered down, but really, intensified in different ways, right? I mean, so within happiness, there's elation, there's so many different elements, but or sadness, you don't have to, have experienced a certain sadness to know what sadness is. Mm-hmm. Even though there are different levels of sadness or bitterness, but you have to be able to evoke that. And to that, you have to be open, and obviously, I think you have to live life and experience, and the more you experience, the more hardships you have often. That's an incredible route to being able to have something to say. I'm not suggesting people should go have a hard life, but I know that we all have regrets and things that we cringe about, or things that we are lost. We all experience loss and rejection, and it's part of living. And instead of becoming bitter about it, we need to pick ourselves up and try again, and that also informs your character and how you do. And so having a strong character and being willing to be open to life and to people is a huge part. So you have to have all this inside you when you're performing. But at the same time, you can't let your feeling be what dictates the piece. You have to actually go outside of your body and walk around yourself and judge. So you have to say, am I out of tune? So as you do a crescendo, am I getting out of tune? Am I going sharp? And you're doing the crescendo and you're adding vibrato because you're becoming more emotional, let's say. Yep. But at the same time, you have to get out of yourself and say, okay, so when I'm doing the crescendo and I'm adding the vibrato, is the pitch staying the same? Mm-hmm. So you lose control if you're not outside your body. And to be inside and outside of your body at the same time is I think, a fascinating thing. Just so I know I do it. I mean, you do it. Yeah. How often, sometimes I know, for instance, I'm playing a concert and there's a noise. Yeah. and there's a noise there and you react to it. I mean, I do at least. And of course, one of my most paranoid and first responses is, oh, somebody hates what I'm doing.
Oh, no.
Right. That happens. I mean, there's a noise. I think somebody's like expressing outrage at my interpretation. It's ridiculous, but that's what I mean. It could happen, but that's your first response. And then what happens is that I say to myself, come on, how come this is your first response? I mean, it's something else. And then another voice comes in and says, stop thinking about this or you're not going to know where you are in the piece. Yeah. And then another voice comes, it's like, amazing, I still know where I am and I'm ignoring this. And so you've got like 6 or 7 things going on at the same time. Yeah. Because you're inside and you're outside.
Mm-hmm. Man, that inner critic can really be a bully, huh?
This is the worst. I mean, let's face it, one is one's own worst critic and enemy. And at the same time, you got to live with yourself. So.
Oh, shoot.
But it can become very, esoteric and I think also philosophical in a way, how one approaches pieces. And so beautiful that so many people will approach things differently.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the inner critic, I have been reading a book actually on this notion. It's called All or Nothing by McKinney. And he gives some really great tactful approaches that we can do to kind of hush that inner critic, and I like it a lot.
Who's the author?
McKinney. I forget his first name off the top of my head. I'll have to put in the show notes, but his last name is McKinney.
That's wonderful. I think you have so many wonderful resources, and see, you can do this. You like reading these things,
Yeah.
and I think they're really fascinating, and I love hearing about them. And my husband also is very good at he loves reading these things, and we have incredible conversations. And I never read a single one of these books, but I love hearing and then kind of trying to put it into my own way. And understand. These books. I remember when I was in school, the big rage was always the Inner Game of Tennis, which had been around forever. But these are great books. I love reading biographies. Actually, that is something I love to do.
Yeah.
And I always find that reading biographies, I learn a lot because, especially if it's an autobiography. I read once the huge biography of Frederick the Great.
Okay.
Just because I was interested in the fact that he played the flute. And I learned a lot about wars and about Voltaire and things like that. And I remember the Berlioz autobiography is also something fascinating to read.
Okay.
And you learn a lot about also orchestration, but politics. And then you understand the craziness that was this guy.
Oh, wow.
When you play Symphonie Fantastique, you just come to it with a completely different attitude.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful new book too. It's not that new, but I think it's called L'après-midi d'une faune, and it is a biography of Debussy.
Okay.
But it starts with a description of the premiere of the Après-midi, and I don't know if we all knew about it. How it really was when it was first performed.
Oh, neat! I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's great. So historical things I find really, I love history.
Huh.
It's really, really great. Yeah.
It's fascinating. I agree. History, autobiographies, biographies. I'm really into how the mind works. And so that's fascinating because obviously there's a huge connection to what we do as musicians. But yeah, it's great to dive into those different subjects and, just get curious about life.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I think what you're doing with this podcast is so great because of it, and you bring so many different people talking about so many different elements in different ways. That's it's an exploration, and I like that because I can listen to it.
Thank you, Marina. Yeah, it's been going on for about 2.5 years now, and I have been so blessed with guests like you who are so willing to come on the show and just share their knowledge and expertise in such a intimate, loving, comfortable way. And I like having that dialogue because for me, dialogue just stirs up inspiration. And if I'm inspired, if my listeners are inspired, the community, then I don't know, we just feel more motivated and, let me go try that out and, et cetera. So it's, it's been a great platform, and I've been very blessed to have people like you come on.
Well, what a pleasure. What a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
I think that's, again, one of those wonderful, silver linings that we have to search for in this time of, the virus and the distancing. But the fact that we can connect, and then we find even greater meaning in it, that we might, we cherish it more, perhaps.
True. Well, on that note, that was so beautifully said. I think that's a great way to wrap up this episode. Is there anything else that you want to say? Any last sentiments that you want to share?
Oh, no. I mean, I think we spoke so much. I agree. I second with you what you're saying about the message of your podcast and this idea of really experimenting, exploring. I maybe can't stress enough that people need to be open to situations and to each other, and willing to be flexible and try things out, especially, I'm talking about music, of course, but also in human relations. I mean, in the end, everything we do is about the fact that we're on this planet together for this amount of time, and we want to communicate with each other, I think.
Very well said. Thank you
so much. Yeah, thank you.
This has been amazing, Marina, and I just love just seeing your insights and everything. It's just been a wonderful time for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to chatting with you again somewhere, somehow, and even in person.
Yes, I hope it's very soon.
Too. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Today's sponsor is brought to you by J&K Productions. Did you know that not only are they a production company for podcasts, but they are a recording company for musicians? Any musical recording needs that you may have, J&K Productions can fulfill that need. They have all the necessary equipment and expertise to record your next flute recording for college or graduate auditions, competitions, summer festivals, or a flute album. J&K Productions can record any setup imaginable, from solo flute, small chamber, flute and piano, and much more. Consider J&K Productions for your next recording project. Contact them at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes Store. Let's talk about flute.